After the ambulance took John to the hospital, tell us what you do next.
I left. I told Mrs. O'Keefe, I said, I'm going to come get you. She said, well, I'm going to have Braintree Police take me to the hospital, which was in Brockton. And I said, they're not going to take you to Brockton. I will come get you because neither of their cars had four-wheel drive. So I asked if I could leave, and they said, give me your number and we'll follow up with you. And I took Karen with me. We drove down the street. At some point, she was on the phone with Erin O'Keefe, John's sister-in-law, and Karen was saying, I think he's dead, I think he's dead. I grabbed the phone and I said, I don't think he's dead. He's in an ambulance. He's been in an accident. At this point, I didn't know what was going to happen. At some point in the car, as we're driving, she was on the phone with her mother. And I think when we were driving, we got all the way to the elementary school. And Karen said to me, if anything happens to John, I'm going to kill myself. You're going to have to take care of the kids. And I said, nobody's dying, nobody's killing themselves. Let's not think about that. And then one of the officers called me and said, do you have Karen Reed with you? And I said, yes. And he said, could you please turn around and bring her back? Her parents are saying that she's suicidal, so we're going to take her to the hospital and section her. I said, okay. I didn't get far, so I turned around, went back. At some point, she was on the phone with her mother, and I got on the phone with her mother and said, I'm going to be heading to the hospital. Let me give you my phone number. It's the same hospital John's at. I'm assuming they're going to the same. That's where Canton takes everybody. And her mother said, please make sure that they don't let her have her bag. There are things in her bag, medicine I don't want her to have. So I said, okay, I will. So we got back to the house, and she got in the ambulance, and one of the EMTs asked me for her phone, so I handed that over, and I said, the mother wants to make sure that she does not have her purse because there's medication in there that they don't want her to have.
Did you see the defendant leave with medical personnel?
Yes, I did.
Before we move forward, I want to step back for just a moment. Did you see when the medical personnel, the first responders, lifted John from the ground and then put him on a bed?
Yes.
Shortly after they moved John from the ground and brought him to the bed to bring him to the ambulance, did you go back to where John lay when you first saw him?
Yes, I did.
Why did you go back to the spot where John was lying when you first saw him?
When they lifted him up, there was grass underneath him, and I could see his phone. So I went over and picked up the phone and the two baby blankets that were left on the ground.
So let me ask you, when you went back to where John was lying on the ground, you said you saw grass. There was not snow under him?
No, there was not.
Was there many inches of snow around that area?
Yes.
But none where he was lying under him? You said you picked up a couple of items?
Yes.
Could you repeat that again, what you picked up?
I picked up John's phone and two blankets, the blankets that I had Jen get out of the car.
What did you do with John's phone when you picked it up from the ground?
I put it in my pocket and gave it to a first responder when they came over, or I handed it off to a first responder.
And the blankets you picked up, were they in the ground area or on snow as well?
They were, I don't remember.
Okay. How long after you put the phone in your pocket, do you remember when you gave it to a first responder, how long you had it for?
I don't remember.
Do you remember the time that you picked up the phone?
I do not.
Have you seen video of that event?
Yes.
And does that video have times when you went over and picked up that phone?
Yes, but I don't remember, somewhere around 6:12, 6:19.
And you don't know how long you kept it in your pocket before, until you gave it to a first responder?
I do not.
At some point, did you get in your car during that morning before you left and drove from the scene?
Yes.
Do you know if John's phone was still in your pocket when you first got into your car?
I don't know.
Was your car heated that morning? Did you keep it running?
Yes.
And was the heat
I
on
think
it?
I kept it running the whole time. I don't even think I shut it off.
I see. I want to now step forward to where you left us when you said that you had spoken to John's mother, Peggy. And did you decide what you were going to do next?
After I dropped Karen back off at 34 Fairview to get in the ambulance, I then made my way to Braintree. Barely. I was on the highway. I was the only one on the highway. I spun out a couple times.
Can you describe what you mean by spun out?
Well, the driving was no one else was on the road. The driving was horrible. So I spun out almost at the Braintree exit to get to their house. And then I got to the O'Keefe's house, and I said, we are not taking the highway back to Brockton. We're going back roads, which is a much longer way, but there was no way I was putting us in the car on that treacherous.
When you went to the O'Keefe's house, you mean Peggy O'Keefe and John O'Keefe Sr.'s house?
Yes, John's parents.
That's different than Meadows Road.
Correct.
When you got to the home, did you go in?
Yes, for a second. They were ready and waiting for me. They wanted to get to the hospital.
When you say they, can you tell us who was waiting for you?
John's parents, Mr. and Mrs. O'Keefe, were waiting.
What happens next?
Mr. O'Keefe said something about a Dr. Rice and that they were trying to warm John up. We got into the car. Mr. O'Keefe got in my passenger seat. Mrs. O'Keefe got in the back seat. Mrs. O'Keefe's niece worked at Good Samaritan, so we were trying to get in touch with her to see if we were going to be allowed in because there was still COVID restrictions. John's brother was already on his way there, and Mr. O'Keefe at some point said, "He's gone, Peg," and he slammed his hands on the dashboard. But they didn't actually know if he was gone yet. At one point, Karen called me from the ambulance, and on the phone, Mrs. O'Keefe said, "Karen, what happened?" And she said, "I left him at a party." And Mrs. O'Keefe said, "And you just left him?" And Mr. O'Keefe said, "All right, that's enough. She's been through enough." Then we hung up with her. I said, "We're on our way to the hospital."
Let me ask you a question. When the defendant said that she left him, did she say whether she left him outside or inside?
No.
Was the question, follow-up question, never asked?
No.
Okay. Was there any other conversation with the defendant at that point?
Not in the car, but when I got to the hospital, she called me multiple times from the hospital room.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
How long did it take for you and the O'Keefes to get to the hospital?
I would say maybe 45 minutes to an hour.
Share with us the mood in that car.
I think I was in shock, and I think they were in shock. There wasn't, other than talking to Mrs. O'Keefe's niece, trying to find out if we could go in for COVID reasons, there wasn't much talk.
When you finally get to the hospital, take us through your first steps. What happens?
We finally get to the hospital. We walked in. Paul, John's brother, was there. We went over to him, and then Susanna, Mrs. O'Keefe's niece, came out from her office and offered to take me to the bathroom to wash up because I had blood all over my hands. So I went into the bathroom, and I asked her afterwards if she could take me to the chapel so I could say a prayer. So she did. She took me to the chapel, and then when I came out, she took me into her office and explained to me that a Dr. Rice was going to come talk to the family and take them into an office and talk to the family, and then the family would be able to go see John.
Did you get a chance to see John?
I did.
Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about what you saw?
Objection.
I waited in the waiting area. I spoke to my mom. Phone calls were coming in because people had heard what happened. And Mrs. O'Keefe, the family went in to see Dr. Rice. I watched them go in. I watched them walk down a hallway. And then when they came back out, Mrs. O'Keefe told me he was gone.
Objection.
Strike that statement, folks. So, by the way.
Without telling us what anybody said to you, please just share with us what you saw.
I went into the hospital room, and John was in a neck brace. At this point, there was a trail of blood going toward the gurney or the bed that he was on. This time, both eyes were filled with blood. They looked like raccoons. That's the only way to describe it. I thought he was going to look better seeing him in the hospital because he had been worked on, but he was not. There was much more blood.
Were there any other ways that John looked different in the hospital than when you first brushed the snow off his face in the front of Fairview?
when I brushed the snow off his face, his left eye was fine. It had an ice cube on it that I pulled off, but the right eye was out to here, like a golf ball. When I got to the hospital, both eyes were swollen with, it looked like blood. They looked purple.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that how John looked?
Yes, he did.
I'd ask that the camera not on that, please.
I'd like to mark this as an exhibit. I will not publish it.
Exhibit 4, please.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.